Bob Middleton, Judge Rick Mancini, and the man, the myth, the legend. They only made one because the world couldn't handle another. He is none other than Steve Higgins, and out of sick bay. So how are you feeling, champ?
Little weak, Rob. Little weak. Yeah.
We don't bounce like we used to.
I'm trying to do the best I can.
You'll do great. Judge, you're going to kick this thing off. Listen, I wanted Judge Jimmy Ross. I was giving him and Judge Mancini some love on the air today, saying, I don't know what it is, but it seems like every judge in Beaver County was a hard-nosed football player. I think it's one of the reasons why they do such good work there on the bench, the Common Police Court, in the county seat of Beaver. Just fill me up with some Joe Namath. Come on.
Well, I'm going to assume, based on your introduction and praise of me, that you just got in trouble and you need help with something. Is that
No, I'm good, man.
Okay.
I'm all good now.
All right. Well, I mean, Joe Willie, what is there to say that has not been said? I'll give you a couple quick excerpts, though, of a few things. One, years ago, I don't know, it was maybe 10 years ago or so, they were honoring what they called the 6 Golden Arm quarterbacks from the Western Pennsylvania area. The Pittsburgh Steelers were putting it on. I think it was sponsored by Allegheny County Neighborhood Legal Services. They had this grand banquet, one of those places up there, maybe the Lawrence Convention Center. I really don't recall that. But I think it was like, I don't know, $500 a plate. Well, Joe invited us from the foundation, a handful of us, to go up because he was obviously one of the honorees. So we go up, we're sitting there. Of course, beforehand we mingled in the back room, and I ran into
the VIP room.
Yes, in the VIP room, I ran into my old teammate Dwayne Woodruff, who's now a judge in Allegheny
He's your
County.
old teammate?
At Louisville, yes.
I didn't know.
Dwayne was a freshman when I was a senior at Louisville, and he came in as a receiver, and I remember thinking, man, he's a stud, but I don't know, he has a hard time catching. Well, they switched him to defensive back, and obviously the rest is history. Also, got to see Howard Schnellenberger, who then had coached at Louisville, after later years after I was gone. Anyhow, so we did all that, and I got a picture with Jerry Rice, and it was just such a great thing. And Joe was bragging about all of us, instead of us bragging about him. So they're sitting up there, and up on the dais, instead of your typical get up and give a speech type thing, they all were interviewed by a young lady who was the HBO somebody. She was like the HBO sports commentator. You would know her. I can't think of her name, but I can picture her. And as a matter of fact, that format is what we adopted for our banquets. So if you come to a Larry Bruno Foundation banquet, you don't sit and listen to speeches. We learned after a couple years, we're not going that direction.
No.
What you're going to do is you're going to watch people get interviewed. And it was for a while me and Joe doing the interviewing of the inductees, but then, with COVID and all that, Joe hasn't come around as much. Anyhow, so they're sitting up on the dais. You got Joe, you got Joe Montana, you got Jim Kelly, you got Dan Marino.
Oh my God.
You have George Blanda's wife,
Oh
and Johnny Unitas' son. So, because those were the 6 quarterbacks that they were honoring. So she's interviewing all of them, and she started with Joe, naturally. Everything starts with Joe.
I get it.
And he started talking about how growing up, excuse me, and I know you alluded to this a little bit earlier in one of your other podcasts, Johnny Unitas was his hero.
Right.
He wore number 19 in high school. He said they used to call me Joey U because he patterned himself after Johnny Unitas. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you go to Reeves Stadium, where the Tigers play, and obviously Geneva's field, on the 19-yard line, on both ends of the field, the Beaver Falls insignia is there on the field, on the new turf, to honor number 19, Joe Namath. So he went through talking about that, and he said a bunch of other things. So then she goes to the others, who was your hero? She gets to Joe Montana, and he said, I'm going to answer that question for me, for Kelly, and for Marino. And he points at Joe Willie. That guy was our hero. Yeah.
Listen,
That was great.
Remember that?
That was great.
He was, and still is to this day, next to Muhammad Ali. They're kind of neck and neck. And I even think about how when he had the show in New York on WOR out of Secaucus, New Jersey, Dick Schaap, one of the greatest journalists in the history, his son's still doing great work, they would have people like Joe Namath and Mickey Mantle on the show. Do you realize, I don't even know if he was 30 years old then.
Yeah.
How did he have such a gift to communicate? You gotta believe a lot of that was because of his time with Larry Bruno.
Well, Coach Bruno, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Coach Bruno taught us a lot of things, not always in words, but by example. Yes, exactly. I said this many times. You know, when I played for him, I feared him. Even the night that I picked up his daughter Val to take her out to the prom, I feared him.
Val, we gotta get you down here.
Yeah. And then whenever I was coaching at Beaver Falls, he was my mentor. I mean, he was my mentor when I played, but I looked at him not as a peer, because he was always a level above, but as a friend. And then in later years, matter of fact, when I first ran for judge, he campaigned for me harder than anybody, and I looked at him as a father figure. And as a matter of fact, I hate to use the word honor, but I will say I had the honor of giving the eulogy at his funeral, both him and Jenny, his wife. He's bigger than life figure. I used to say he is without question the Vince Lombardi of high school football.
He looks like him.
Yeah, and he coached like him.
Really?
Yeah.
Was he that tough?
Well, I thought that's who he was the first time I ever
Oh,
seen
come
him.
on.
As a little kid. Yeah, I went up
Did he
to
make
practice
you do
one
things
day.
over, like
And
Lombardi?
I went
got
home
sweet?
because my brother had gone out for the team. And they were working out at the stadium. This is 1966. And I come home and we're having dinner, and I told my dad, I seen Vince Lombardi at the field today. And my dad started laughing. He asked me a question. He said, no, son, that was Larry Bruno.
Listen, I know one thing. Larry Bruno loved them little shoes. We love you. You
Yeah.
are an icon. No one can spin a web better than this guy. So talk to me about your early recollection of Joe Namath, who probably bought his Holy Communion shoes at your store.
He may have. Would you believe I have never met Joe Namath? I can give you a list of 500
He
athletes.
told me that
I
tonight. I
know.
couldn't believe it.
Yep, I've never met Joe Namath.
Well, we gotta fix that.
Yeah, we got to change. We got to get Joe up here somehow.
One of
Well,
these
you know
days.
what's
Yeah, he might
ironic?
want free shoes off.
I've talked to him lots. I only met him once. And I gotta tell you, it was surreal.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you just have to understand, and I'm not gonna repeat it again, but I have a tendency to do that. All the quarterbacks who have the swag today, all the quarterbacks who are making the multi-billions, the young Patrick Mahomes, how he just plays the game and what he does because of his old baseball playing days. It's all Joe Namath. All the guys that came through that he mentioned, the Marinos, the Kellys, all of them. Montana, it's because of Joe.
Well, you know, when Joe Walton first became the coach of Robert Morris, okay, obviously in his later years in his coaching, he had a golf outing up at the Beaver Valley. It was then called the Beaver Valley Country Club. It's now the Beaver Valley Golf Club. And he brought all these people in because, you know, obviously him coaching and playing in the NFL, he had a lot of connections there. And he coached with the Jets and the Redskins, and Joe Theismann was there, you name it. Well, there were a bunch of kids there with their notepads going around getting autographs off of everybody. I mean, there were probably 10 or 12 well-known NFL players, coaches there. Joe Willie pulls up, gets out of his car. They grabbed the pens off of whoever was getting ready to sign and all ran over to him. I felt bad for the other guys. It was like they didn't matter anymore.
I have to ask this because, you know, you want to dare to dream. If you could wave a magic wand and Namath is coming up healthy now, no bad knees, arthroscopic surgery if he had to get it, he's great. It's not 1964, but it's 2025. And he's out of the shotgun.
Oh.
I mean, you're the football player. What does that mean if he's in the shotgun, a healthy, even if he wasn't healthy, how
It's like
that could
crap
sustain
like
his
we were
career?
seeing with Mahomes.
Right.
It's similar to what you're seeing with Mahomes.
Second
Because he
best
reminds
shot
me
in the
of Joe with a quick release, because he does have a quick release.
Who was the guy, maybe it was Dick Schaap, who was the one, and correct me if I'm wrong, that said when he threw the ball, you could hear like a whistle in the air, that he had never heard it before.
Yeah.
That was one of Joe's assistants on the documentary.
Well, that was actually the center, the guy that played center for him.
Oh, is that
Remember?
who it was?
Yes,
Yeah.
when they on the HBO documentary. Yeah. Well, Bear Bryant said at that point he was the greatest athlete he ever coached.
Could he really play multiple sports in high school?
Well, he was before our time,
Yeah.
but of course, yeah,
like-
We heard the stories.
yeah, legendary. I mean, I
Signing
can.
with the Cubs.
Well, yeah,
What's
exactly.
that, Bobby?
Well, in baseball, he was a great baseball player. and his team won the Whippy his senior year. And they beat Elizabeth Forward in the finals at Forbes
You
Field.
see a picture?
No, he was a center fielder.
Outfielder.
Elizabeth Forward had Bill Robinson,
The baseball
future
player.
Pirate, okay, on the team.
Yep.
And I heard a story that they were taking batting practice before the game. And you know how deep the fence is at Forbes Field. And some of the Elizabeth Forward players knew who Joe was from football season, and they were giving him the business from the dugout. Joe gets digs in, and hits one over the fence. So this is batting practice before the game.
Listen,
But he sent a message to them guys like, hey, you got some trouble coming.
all right, Dr. Mayo, if you're out there, much love to you, brother. And I just want to say, I do a lot of this because of your stories growing up in New York and idolizing Joe Willie. And being that you're one of the greatest orthopedic surgeons, you put me together back how many times, like Humpty Dumpty. I'm grateful for it all. It's the 20th anniversary of my ankle fusion. I never felt better. You're the best. But he brought this, and I'm going to make him go off camera to grab it and show everyone. Tell everybody, show them this knee brace.
Oh,
Go get
we
it.
have a replica here in the museum of the knee brace that Joe wore in the 60s in the Super Bowl. And it's kind of comical to
Go
see
get
it, but it's right here.
But here's the thing that I wanted to ask all you. I don't know if any of you know. When did he first? 'Cause I can remember show that in the camera. I remember when Terry Francona blew his knee out the first time. Do you remember when Joe got hurt the first time, or was this just multiple injuries on top of multiple injuries?
Do you want to tell them about the NC State game
Is that when it happened, Stevie?
in college?
Yeah. Perfect.
You want to talk about it?
No,
Rick?
go ahead, you can tell them.
They played NC State,
Hey, grab me that Diet Coke over there, right there. Thank you.
And keep
and
them,
NC State had is in their defensive backfield Tony Goldmont, who Tony Goldmont was a receiver on Joe's high school team. And Tony Goldmont was a great player in his own right. And Tony Goldmont did not make the hit that hurt Joe's knee. I want to get that on record as saying. But he was in the defensive backfield playing against Alabama when Namath ran the ball and he got tackled or got hit or whatever. But that's the game that he got hurt in college.
well, and you know, Joe was a really good runner.
Yeah.
In addition to throwing the ball, I mean, but obviously the knee injuries curtailed that. And then, of course, back in his day in the NFL, there weren't a lot of running quarterbacks. I mean, there might have been a few scramblers like Fran Tarkenton or whatever, but quarterbacks didn't run the football because it was no holds barred. I mean, you watch it, well, tomorrow, if they breathe on the quarterback a little bit heavy, even though he may be out of the pocket and running, they're going to flag him. You watch the old replays of like Joe playing against the Oakland Raiders, he would throw the ball, he's looking at the ball, and Ben Davidson would come and lay him out.
Ben Davidson.
And they, remember? And
It's a
they,
different era.
yeah, and there was no penalty there. And he'd get up and push his shoulder pads back and let's go.
Different era.
Come on, jump in here, talk a little bit.
I'm just listening.
No,
Now that I
keep, come
can-
on. Fran Tarkenton.
Fran Tarkenton was the scrambler.
He was
That was
tough,
it.
smart
And,
man.
and back then they said you'll never win with a running quarterback.
This is how much
Were they wrong or what?
how much of a geek I am. I love the players of today, and we are going to preview the big game with these guys. But I watch daily updates from Fran Tarkenton, messages every day.
85 years old.
The guy,
Wow.
the guy is an entrepreneurial genius. I didn't realize he went to Georgia. He goes back to Georgia. Kirby Smart and them, they're like rushing to see this guy.
Yeah, well, he's legendary.
Yeah.
But another quarterback in the same era that played a year before Joe, but there was a running quarterback was Roger Staubach at Navy.
For Navy.
Okay, and he was Bay Pirelli, Sports Illustrated named him the top quarterback of the 50s college. Bay Pirelli. In the 60s, should have been Joe, but Roger Staubach was named the quarterback of the decade of the
Really?
60s. But a lot of people think Namath, just like Namath didn't get the Heisman, they gave it to the kid from Notre Dame. Because let's face it, Rob, back then things were still political in this
Yeah,
country.
Notre Dame.
The people that are voting were, some of them were, you know,
Do you ever think about what Paul Bear Bryant did when they got busted up by Sam Cunningham, and he said, look, I'm going to let them run it up on us so these people in the South realize we got to be an equal opportunity school and get blacks to come to our school. Imagine what these coaches, some of the decisions they had to make off the field, which were larger than life. And it's sad that we were even at that state in that time in the 60s, but they took some really major
can you imagine
steps.
that? The risk that he took?
Oh,
I mean, he was so beloved then, and then he, to make that choice
gotta run it up on
and
him.
to take that
Coach
stance
McKay.
was almost like guys back in the post-Civil War, you know, supporting like the South or whatever, would be the same way. I mean, he was risking his whole career here, I think.
Well,
You know, Michigan State was the beneficiary of a lot of that.
What do you mean?
The black football players they had in the '60s, the Bubba Smiths that couldn't get into a school down there, and some of the Southern coaches, you know, sent them up his way.
You know, one thing about Beaver Falls, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, what I've always heard about Joe, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but sometimes you gotta speak your mind, that he didn't see race. They said he was one of the most, and I've always looked at my life that way, and a lot of it I think has to do because of these early stories of Joe.
Well, you don't listen. You don't have to
We're
stop
all
it.
like
You don't have to stop at Joe.
We're all like that.
That's what's unique about it.
Those who do not think that way are the exception, not the norm in Beaver Falls. I mean, growing up, you know, I'm a couple years older than Stevie, 1 year younger than Bobby. Bobby was a year ahead of me. Stevie was my brother's age, so he was 3 years behind me. But I grew up in White Township, and no, there was no such.
No racial divide.
No, it was never even a thought, let alone a divide. Now, when things started happening nationally, I think I was maybe in 8th grade when Martin Luther King got assassinated, and then some of it filtered into the area, but not to us Beaver Falls guys. That was never an issue.
What I remember about Joe too, he said about how different it was when he went to Alabama. And he saw some of that stuff down there and just couldn't believe it.
Well, you know what, Rob, and I'm surprised this has not been talked about more. Everybody in our era, in our age, remembers, either saw or at least heard of, when George Wallace stopped the student.
Black student.
Right. Joe was in school.
He was there.
Yeah.
He was in the crowd.
Yeah.
Crying out loud.
Did he ever say to you guys what he felt like when that happened?
Well, on his, remember
No, it
on
was
the
natural.
on the HBO documentary,
Off to Broadway.
he talked about it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. He said we couldn't believe. He said, I couldn't believe it. Well, the girl's name was Vivian or something. I remember, and he
was
said,
cheering for him.
yeah, he said, they're not going to let Vivian come to school.
You know that thing that you were in that documentary, and I'm not just saying this because you're sitting here, but you were very visible. Joe really likes you a lot. I mean, so what is it with you and Joe? What's the connection, Judge?
Well, the difference between him and I is probably about $5 million a year. Yeah,
And you're highly underpaid.
But you know what? And I actually have.
You are.
Okay.
I have had getting to know him, mainly through the foundation. I mean, the first time I met him, like anybody else, when we had the event up at Reeves, remember? I mean, I'm like, oh my
Never
goodness,
forget that.
there's Joe Willie. I mean, but since then we've had some really good connections, and I haven't talked to him lately, but over the last couple of years, he would randomly call me, like when Louisville was playing on TV, he'd call me, hey, they're looking pretty good, and I called him one time when Alabama was playing. But be that as it may, let me tell you this, I did say this to him one time in one of our conversations. I said, you know what, man? I said, all this stuff they talk about you. I said, here's when I realized you really made it. When I heard on the documentary that Frank Sinatra himself made reservations to eat with you in your restaurant, you made it, baby.
Did it.
That's it.
You know the toughest thing, go ahead, Steve.
Well, what I was gonna say is, Joe and a lot like other guys from Beaver Falls, we love greatness. We respect greatness. We respect talent. We don't get jealous. We don't look at
Right.
Alan Quip and say, we wish we were Alan Quip.
You know the show.
We respect him. Hold on.
Go ahead.
That's why Joe Willie loves him.
Well, and you know what?
Because let me tell you, two of the coolest guys that ever walked the streets of 7th Avenue.
He still got the
Joe
swag.
Namath, the Rick Mancini, right
Okay.
there.
Here comes the judge.
All
Right at
all
the
right.
top.
No.
All right, so now I'm getting the feeling all
Yeah, but let me tell you,
of you need
you know one of
something,
the
a parking
toughest-
ticket fixed or what?
One of the toughest
Yeah, I have one right here.
piece of footage that I've ever seen of Joe, and to this day, it's hard for me to watch it, when they were trying to take Baxter's 3 off of him.
Yeah.
When he was in tears. I just wanted to say, give me a pit bull agent, attorney, let me get in there and fight for Joe. I mean, they talk about Michael Jordan, and rightfully so, I get it. They talk about Ohtani, I get it. We'll be here all day, the Steelers we've seen. But to be in your 20s with Bachelor's 3, the TV show, making the movies, winning the big game, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see that again.
Oh, forget all that. How about hanging out with Aunt Margaret and Farrah
Well,
Fawcett?
listen, I was never an athlete, but I'll tell you this, and I said it earlier, in case you folks missed it. 12 years old, family theater. I see that movie with him. I'm like, the hell with football. I want to be in the movie.
Yeah.
How old is Joe now?
How old?
82?
Yeah, at least.
How many athletes?
Talk about that movie.
Yeah, show that, man. Look at that. Come on, Joe. But he just the family, from what I heard, his family was just so unique, and Frank and all them and the parents. And did any of you guys see him play live in high school? Did you?
No, I was too young.
You didn't either.
No.
Do you have any of that footage you could eventually show here? Like
I have his highlight film right here. I could have it on in 2 minutes.
All right, we're going to take a break here. I'm going to come back and do the big game. So let me shut this off and start it up again. But so happy to be here. They made my night, even though we got a 2 a.m. wake-up call. Don't forget the Coons Market big game edition tomorrow. Ryan Lehmeyer, head coach Central Catholic, will kick it off. And guess who's going to join us after that? He's now in New Orleans because of your Pittsburgh Steelers. Thank you to Art II, good people. Gene Matsup
Oh,
was the
wow.
coach chosen. He is in New Orleans, going to enjoy that game.
Good
Isn't
for
that
him.
nice? Isn't that
Yeah.
nice?
Underrated coach, but one of the best ever, Gene
Oh,
Matsup.
no.
Great football family.
Exactly, all three. I mean, Danny, who is my age, and his son Ryan. I mean,
He
they
took them to a state title, Beaver Falls.
Ryan revived the Tiger program.
Then,
he did.
a guy that I've really gotten close with, who actually coached in the county for a while, Jerry Schmidt at Duquesne.
From Beaver.
Yeah, he's going to come up. Is he originally from Beaver?
Yeah, he coached in Beaver when he got hired at Duquesne. He was living in Beaver.
Nice.
I don't know
Anyway,
if he's from there originally.
and then Ted and I and Greg, Mr. Diolis, his client Travis Kelsey, I know who he's rooting for. We're going to talk about the big game coming up next. Stay with us. We're at the Larry Bruno Foundation, a must for everyone. It's a bucket list. You're not going to find this anywhere else. Heart of Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, 7th Avenue, just in case you're wondering.